Anger was expressed in many games, yes.
In your
towards
direction?
Me. Yes, in my direction.
And
absolutely.
In the world of sports, athletes may come and go, but they rarely vanish. Barry Sanders, the most unstoppable running back of his time, left his mark everywhere. His name was always linked to greatness, and he was a legend in the making. Fans and teams wanted him, and his success seemed never-ending, but then, out of nowhere, Sanders shocked the entire NFL. He didn't just retire, he disappeared. On July 27, 1999, the NFL world was stunned when Barry Sanders, one of the league's greatest running backs, suddenly announced his retirement. What made it even more shocking was that it happened just one day before the Detroit Lions training camp was about to begin. What makes the scenario more shocking is the way he announced his retirement. Sanders didn't hold a press conference or make a grand statement. Instead, he quietly sent a fax to the Wichita Eagle, the newspaper in his hometown. In that letter, Sanders revealed the thoughts that had been weighing on him since the end of the previous season. He wrote, "Shortly after the end of last season, I felt that I probably would not return for the 1999 to 2000 season. I also felt that I should take as much time as possible to sort through my feelings and make sure that my feelings were back with conviction. Today, I officially declare my departure from the NFL." Players usually leave their career when either their health deteriorates or their power on the field declines, but none of these was the case for Sanders.
Is this it? Is that all from Barry Sanders? And where do they all go from here?
And is there any turning back at this point for the Lions or for Barry Sanders?
Sanders left the game healthy and at the peak of his career with an incredible 15,269 rushing yards, the most any NFL player had ever gained in just a 10-year span. He was within striking distance, only 1,457 yards away of breaking Walter Payton's all-time rushing record. Many, including Emmitt Smith, who would eventually claim the record, believed Sanders would have easily surpassed Payton if he had kept playing. While some praised Sanders for walking away on his own terms, others found his decision surprising and controversial. His father even remarked that it took guts for Barry to make such a choice. Sanders had signed a 6-year, $34.56 million contract with the Lions just 2 years earlier, including an $11 million signing bonus. His retirement meant giving up $20.9 million in salary, bonuses, and millions more in endorsements. The Lions, upset by his sudden departure, demanded that he return $7.37 million of the signing bonus. Sanders' representatives refused, and the Lions took the matter to the NFL. In February 2000, an arbitrator ruled that Sanders had to repay $1.833 million immediately, with the rest to be paid over the next 3 years, as long as he stayed retired. He left the field, but the rumors didn't stop. There were rumors that Lions head coach Bobby Ross might have pushed Sanders into early retirement, but Sanders later cleared up the speculation in his autobiography, Barry Sanders, Now You See Him. He praised Ross and explained that the real reason behind his decision was his frustration with the Lions' management and the team's lack of success. The Lions had to let go of quality players, and despite all his personal accomplishments, Sanders hadn't achieved his ultimate goal of playing in a Super Bowl. My retirement letter didn't even hint at my frustration because I didn't want to take shots at people as I left, Sanders wrote. We'd been losing for years, and now we were right back where we were when I arrived. Since his retirement, Sanders has mended his relationship with the Lions. In 2017, he took on a paid role as a team ambassador, and in September 2023, the Lions honored him by dedicating a bronze statue outside Ford Field, recognizing his lasting impact on the franchise and the game. His selection in the NFL wasn't an easy one, as initially he was ineligible for the NFL draft. When Sanders was a junior in college, he wasn't supposed to be eligible for the NFL draft. But things took a turn when his school, Oklahoma State, got in trouble with the NCAA for recruiting violations. On New Year's Day 1989, the NCAA put the team on probation for 4 years. This meant if Sanders stayed for his senior season, his games wouldn't be broadcast live and he wouldn't get to play in a bowl game. Because of these circumstances, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle gave Sanders special permission to enter the draft early. 1 year later, the NFL changed its rules, allowing all juniors to participate in the draft. When Sanders went through pre-draft measurements, he stood at 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 203 pounds. Despite his size, his talent was undeniable. The Detroit Lions ended up drafting Sanders 3rd overall in the 1989 NFL Draft, right after Troy Aikman and Tony Mandarich. The Lions head coach, Wayne Fontes, was a big reason they picked Sanders. Fontes was impressed by Sanders' strength and athleticism, especially after watching him lift 225 pounds for 21 reps. At the time, the Lions were struggling. Since the NFL to AFL merger in 1970, they had only made the playoffs twice and hadn't had a winning season since 1983. The team's management was considering drafting another star player, cornerback Deion Sanders, but Fontes convinced them that Barry Sanders was the right choice. He even offered Barry the number 20 jersey, which had been worn by former Lions star running back Billy Sims. Fontes wanted Barry to wear it as a tribute to Sims, who had been one of the league's top players in the early 1980s. Sanders later admitted that he wasn't sure how his career would have turned out if a different team, like the Green Bay Packers, had drafted him instead. He jokes about the cold weather in Green Bay, saying he didn't know if he could have handled playing there. Even though Sanders was drafted by the Lions, he didn't join training camp right away because of a contract dispute. Eventually, they worked things out, and Sanders signed a 5-year, $9.5 million deal, which included a $2.1 million signing bonus. Sanders showed his generous side by donating 10% of his bonus, which was about $210,000, to his local church, Paradise Baptist Church. At his first press conference with the Lions, Sanders made it clear that he wanted to help the team improve. He told everyone he was ready to restore the roar in the dome, signaling his commitment to turning the franchise around. From the moment he started playing, he became a threat to all the other players because of his skills. As a rookie in 1989, Sanders played in 13 out of 16 games for the Lions. In his very first professional game against the Phoenix Cardinals in September 10, he ran for 71 yards in just 9 attempts and scored a touchdown, though the Lions lost 16-13. Later, against the Chicago Bears, he rushed for 126 yards and another touchdown, but got injured with bruised ribs and a hip pointer, which bothered him for the rest of the season. On October 1st, in a tough game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he only managed 1 yard in 5 attempts, but he bounced back against the Minnesota Vikings, rushing for 99 yards. And after that game, Vikings head coach Jerry Burns even asked the officials to check if Sanders was using silicone to make him harder to tackle. Nothing illegal was found, of course. And in the final game of the season on December 24th, Sanders put up an incredible performance against the Atlanta Falcons, running for 158 yards and scoring 3 touchdowns. The Lions had a phone line set up in the press box to monitor Christian Okoye, another top running back at the time, because Sanders was close to beating Okoye for the league's rushing title. When Okoye's game ended, Sanders was only 10 yards behind him, and head coach Wayne Fontes offered him the chance to go back into the game to get the rushing title. Sanders, though, chose not to, letting Okoye keep the title. He ended the season with 1,470 rushing yards, which set both a Lions rookie record and an all-time franchise record. He also scored 14 touchdowns. Sanders was named NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, made the PFWA All-Rookie Team, and earned his first Pro Bowl selection and first-team All-Pro honors. Despite these achievements, the Lions finished with a 7-9 record and missed the playoffs. In 1990, Sanders started the season strong, but the Lions continued to struggle. In the regular season opener on September 9th, he ran for 79 yards and a touchdown in a 38-21 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Later, against the Kansas City Chiefs, he racked up 90 rushing yards, a touchdown, and 135 receiving yards, including a 47-yard touchdown catch. Sanders had his best game of the season against the Los Angeles Raiders on December 10th, where he rushed for 176 yards and scored 2 touchdowns, earning his first NFC Offensive Player of the Week award. By the end of the year, Sanders led the league with 1,304 rushing yards, becoming the first Lions running back to do so since Byron White in 1940. He also scored 13 rushing touchdowns and earned his second Pro Bowl selection and another first-team All-Pro nod. Unfortunately, the Lions finished the season with a 6-10 record and missed the playoffs again. In 1991, Sanders had another impressive season. He missed the season opener due to sore ribs, but returned to dominate later, especially in a game against the Minnesota Vikings on November 24, where he rushed for 220 yards and scored 4 touchdowns. He dedicated the game to teammate Mike Utley, who had suffered a career-ending spinal cord injury the previous week. Sanders finished the regular season with 1,548 rushing yards and a career-high 16 rushing touchdowns. He was once again selected to the Pro Bowl and named first-team All-Pro. The Lions had their best season in years, finishing with a 12-4 record and clinching the NFC Central. They made the playoffs for the first time since 1983, and in the divisional round, the Lions faced the Dallas Cowboys, and Sanders helped secure the team's first postseason win since 1957, with a memorable 47-yard touchdown run and a 38-6 victory. However, in the NFC Championship game, Sanders struggled, managing only 44 yards and 11 carries as the Lions were blown out 41-10 by the Washington Redskins, who went on to win the Super Bowl. Sanders would never win another playoff game for the rest of his career. His talent made him become the highest-paid running back in the NFL. But in 1992, Sanders had a tough start to the season. On September 13th, he ran the ball 26 times but only gained 66 yards against the Minnesota Vikings. The next week wasn't much better, as he managed just 34 yards and 14 attempts in a close 13-10 loss to the Washington Redskins. However, things picked up on November 22 when Sanders ran for 151 yards and scored a touchdown against the Cincinnati Bengals. This game was special because it pushed his career rushing total to 5,202 yards, breaking the Lions' franchise record previously held by Billy Sims. He ended the season strong, with 104 yards and 19 attempts against the San Francisco 49ers in the final regular season game. Sanders finished the season with 1,352 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns, ranking 4th in the league for rushing yards. Despite his individual success, the Lions struggled, finishing with a disappointing 5-11 record and missing the playoffs. In 1993, Sanders was on track for a big season, but on November 25th, after rushing for 63 yards against the Chicago Bears, he suffered a torn medial collateral ligament that sidelined him for the last 5 games of the season. This injury came at a bad time as Sanders was chasing the rushing title that year. Even so, Sanders and the Lions agreed to a new 4-year, $17.2 million contract, making him the highest-paid running back in the NFL. He finished the season with 1,115 rushing yards, despite playing only 11 games. Sanders made it to the Pro Bowl again and earned AP's second-team All-Pro honors. The Lions ended with a 10-6 record and made the playoffs, but lost to the Green Bay Packers in the wild card round. And Sanders played well, rushing for 169 yards, but it wasn't enough, as the Lions lost 28-24. In 1994, Sanders had a slow start, with just 16 yards and 12 attempts in the season opener against the Minnesota Vikings. But he bounced back the next week against the Dallas Cowboys, rushing for 194 yards on a career-high 40 attempts. His performance earned him NFC Offensive Player of the Week honors, and he continued to dominate, including a standout game against the New England Patriots, where he rushed for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns included a highlight reel run where Sanders juked past defenders, leaving them spinning. Sanders' best statistical game that season came against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he ran for a career-high 237 yards, setting a franchise record. Although he didn't score a touchdown, it was one of the most memorable games of his career. By the end of the season, Sanders was close to breaking 2,000 rushing yards, but in the final game against the Miami Dolphins, he was held to just 52 yards. Despite this, Sanders still led the NFL in rushing yards with 1,883, which was the 4th highest total in league history at the time. He finished the year with 2,166 total yards from scrimmage and was named NFL Offensive Player of the Year. He also came second in MVP voting behind Steve Young. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, Sanders had the worst game of his career, rushing for -1 yard on 13 attempts as the Lions lost to the Packers 16-12. At one point, it seemed as if Sanders was the only player trying to make things work for the Lions. Sanders' 1995 season started strong with a solid game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he rushed for 108 yards. He had a rough patch against the 49ers, but bounced back big against the Cleveland Browns, putting up 157 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a 75-yard run. By the end of the season, he had 1,500 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns, earning another Pro Bowl selection. The Lions made the playoffs but were crushed by the Eagles in a blowout loss, 58-37. In 1996, Sanders had another standout year. He kicked off the season with a big game against the Vikings, rushing for 163 yards. He had several other impressive performances, including a 175-yard effort against the 49ers in the final game. Sanders led the league in rushing with 1,553 yards and 11 touchdowns. But despite his efforts, the Lions went 5-11 and missed the playoffs. Still, he made the Pro Bowl once again. In 1997, under new head coach Bobby Ross, Sanders started slow but quickly found his groove. He had monster games, including a 215-yard outing against the Buccaneers and a 216-yard effort against the Colts. He finished the season with an incredible 2,053 rushing yards, becoming only the third player in NFL history to break the 2,000-yard mark. Sanders set records for most consecutive 100-yard games in a season and won the MVP award. The Lions made the playoffs but lost in the wild card round to the Buccaneers. Sanders' 1998 season was his last. He had some big games, including a 185-yard performance against the Bengals, but the Lions struggled, finishing 5-11. Sanders ended the season with 1,491 rushing yards, just shy of 1,500 for a 5th straight year. He was selected to his 10th Pro Bowl, but retired unexpectedly after the season. And that is it for this one, but if you happen to like NFL Legends, make sure to check out our latest videos on our channel NFL Icons. I'm sure you'll love it.